Yo, appreciate everybody for zapping in. Welcome back to another video with your boy, Young Homie TC. So today we're getting into a little video basically speaking about how
Overpowered guns are in any anime power system, and I low key am glad that we're getting to do a video like this because
there's a lot to unpack over here. Let's get it.
Why are guns so overpowered in anime? How can an S-class Jujutsu sorcerer lose to a 9mm handgun? And why is it so satisfying to see guns break power systems? You've heard the phrase, the more complex a power system, the funnier it is when someone pulls out a gun. But how true is that really? And why is it kind of a great test for comparing different anime? That's why in this video, I'm gonna list the best examples of guns in anime, discuss how they negate one of anime's core principles, and explain why even the best power systems can have one major flaw. And the best way to do that is by starting with one of anime's core principles, fairness. To be clear, I really should be saying battle series. Obviously, if someone pulls out a gun in Kaguya-sama, that's a completely different situation. And if you're watching Black Lagoon, well then nobody cares because everyone has a gun.
Yeah.
But in battle series, fairness is a crucial element
Facts.
because it allows characters to get stronger as long as they train enough. It guarantees that any character can achieve their goals or win a fight if they put in the effort. And even if there's characters with crazy abilities, fairness dictates that there should at least be some checks and balances between the different kinds of powers. This is where the element of complexity comes in, because the more rules you add to a power system, the more limits you place on otherwise broken characters.
Real.
It's for these reasons that guns consistently shake up every good power system. Everyone has one example of an episode where someone brings a gun to a Beyblade fight or a
Bro, like we literally saw we literally saw this happen in Gachia Kuta, right? I hope I'm saying it correctly, but if y'all tapped in, we literally just saw that happen, bro. Shotty put out the, 9mm, bro, 9mm, and started busting holes through people, bro. That whole power system, bro. When the choppers start coming out, but the whole power system becomes nothing, irrelevant, bro. When niggas start getting holes poked through them with bullets, bro. In GTA, in GTA, bro. The power system becomes irrelevant. You saw that. You saw that the given powers meant nothing when the Blade came out, bro. The given powers meant nothing. I promise you, the same thing happened with the samurai back in the day, and I think this is why they do this, right?
I think they do this because back in the day, being a samurai was a big part of being anybody a warrior or being in any type of military unit, right? So it used to be about training and hard work. Like niggas would train hard work, and now you'd be some crazy skilled swordman slicing niggas up. I think people. That's how it used to be. That's how the narrative used to be until guns came into the picture, and now you're a samurai who's known for mowing down like armies, bro. Like you mowing down 20 people at a time, bro. Just mowing and surviving that. Not one guy with a gun comes, pops you in the back, you're done. Literally what happened with the samurai, and that's why they incorporate that thing into anime, bro. Because that's literally what happened.
In their history, bro. So I get it, bro. When guns came in, bro, all of that hard work, all that training, all that other stuff is irrelevant, bro.
Yu-Gi-Oh duel, and suddenly shit gets real. And the reason guns are so shocking in these types of anime is because guns are fundamentally unfair. Battle series are traditionally built on rules and fairness, so when a gun is added to that equation, the
Same way
question
that the
for
samurai
readers
used to fight, it used
becomes,
to be about
does
honor.
this gun break the power system? Or in other words, does having a gun make the abilities pointless? And a great example of how this plays out is Jujutsu Kaisen. Specifically, the scene where Toji assassinates Rico. In this case, Toji uses a gun because it doesn't have cursed energy, so he's able to sneak it into the barrier undetected.
Easily,
and since
bro.
it doesn't have cursed energy, nobody senses him before he sneaks up on Rico. So in the moment, if you ask, does this break the power system? It kinda seems like it does. Jujutsu Kaisen sets up all of these details about cursed energy and domains and barriers, but anyone with a gun can just walk up and shoot you.
Real.
But Toji only uses the gun for a few minutes before he has to switch back to his other weapons. And he's really the only character to use a gun in a world where everyone else uses swords or spells.
Because-
So the gun doesn't break the power.
Look, it's not that the gun doesn't break the power system. It's that he needed the gun for the element of surprise, right? These niggas can handle guns. That's the crazy thing. That's the part they're not understanding. Like if a nigga came up to Gojo, and started spraying at him, obviously he can handle that. Same thing with everybody else in the show, bro. They can handle it. They can jump, uh, block or evade the bullets, right? But the element of surprise thing is what like breaks the whole power system. The fact that you don't expect somebody to come like that with a gun. You'd expect somebody to come and get through the barrier and use their curse technique or something, right? Because you live in a world full of jujutsu sorcerers, etc., etc. So I get it, right? So it's not the gun that breaks the power system, nigga. It's the fact that the gun is an element of surprise. You don't expect somebody to come with a gun to a jujutsu sorcery match, you know, and that's why guns break power systems. Yo, what's good, Kalix? What's good, man? How you doing, bro? We're watching a video basically about how guns break power systems.
System, but the fact that this can happen does make the gun itself especially unfair in this kind of story where everyone depends so much on sorcery, which
Real.
highlights exactly why guns are so unfair in battle series. Unlike most of the abilities, they don't require a lot of skill to use them. And considering how deadly they are, given how easy they are to use, they overpower all of the normal
Facts.
abilities and ruin the balance of the fights. So the more limits you add so that a power system is carefully balanced, the more shocking it is when some schmuck uses no skill and pulls out a gun. But this is only true with real guns. Because if you watch enough anime, you know that guns aren't always the same.
Yes.
For example, in Soul Eater, Kid is famous for using his guns. But in his case, the guns shoot a kind of energy blast
Facts.
rather than real bullets. In practice, this means
And energy projectiles don't mean nothing, bro. Cause the guns in Soul Eater, bro, are actual people, bro. So you can't really equate those to a gun that was used in JJK or the gun that was used in Gachi Okuta. Cause that was actual fire, actual bullets, bro. You thinking that your giver power is gonna stop an actual bullet is crazy, cause it's not unless you have like a defense based power. You thinking that your innate curse technique is gonna stop a bullet is crazy. It won't unless you're somebody like Gojo. And even when you're somebody like Gojo, element of surprise is a thing, bro. You don't expect nobody to come with gads,
that he
bro.
needs more skill to use them, and they aren't as deadly unless he powers up. It's also worth mentioning that the power system in Soul Eater isn't that complex. There are a few rules, but for the most part, characters can kind of do whatever they want, and the checks and balances are minimal. So in that case, guns aren't shocking because they don't act as a counter to any major rules. Another good example of this is Full Metal Alchemist. It's easy to forget that there are tons of guns in the show, but that's only because most of the characters rely on alchemy. But while there are rules to alchemy, the actual interactions between abilities are basically pretty simple. There's plenty of room for nuance, but there's not a lot of restrictions. In practice, this means that someone like Hawkeye is deadly against most characters, but put her up against one of the homunculi, and they usually counter her attacks. In this case, guns aren't unfair because they're common, they have counters, and the power system doesn't have that many restrictions. But this brings us to why guns are surprisingly important in anime, because I just explained how guns aren't unfair in Full Metal Alchemist and Soul Eater, but the whole point of guns is that they're supposed to be unfair. So if you put guns in an anime that's supposed to be fair, and the guns aren't broken, wouldn't that imply the power system itself is broken? In some
No,
cases,
it means the power system itself is more grounded to reality, and more grounded to the fact that guns are a part of our reality.
maybe, but this is where we have to talk about the overlooked spectrum of fairness and complexity. Take Dragon Ball, for example. Guns are useless in that show because even when an Earthling gets strong enough, they can stop the bullets.
Like Krillin,
This
bro.
highlights the lack of complexity in the power system because there's
Just
no
get
hard
strong,
limit
bro.
on
Yeah.
how strong characters can get, and there aren't a lot of rules about the interactions between abilities. But that doesn't mean Dragon Ball is completely unfair. In fact, there's a few cases where characters have access to one-shot abilities that, while not as overpowered as
Destructive
guns,
disc, yeah.
do have the capacity to take out otherwise overpowered characters. Mind you, Dragon Ball isn't perfectly fair, but this element of one-shot abilities still shows us how there's still some balance in the power system that can be exploited. But that doesn't mean the power system has a lot of restrictions. This is what I mean when I say fairness versus complexity. Fairness is just how balanced the power system is. You can have balance regardless of exactly how many rules there are, and complexity just means detail. You can add entire data books of details to a power system, but unless they actually serve as limits, they don't necessarily make a power system any more fair. So when comparing anime, it's useful to think of this like a graph. You can have a power system that's complex and unfair, complex and fair, simple and fair, or simple and unfair. Now, going back to our question of would a gun break the power system, this is really only true when a power system is complex and fair. And a great example of why this chart is useful to think about is actually One Piece. Because prior to Hockey, One Piece was kind of a mixed bag. It had plenty of details for the abilities, but there weren't a lot of rules besides Devil Fruit users being weak to water and sea stone. And while Logia users were pretty overpowered at the time, they had the same weaknesses as everyone else, so the system as a whole was still somewhat fair. So this was a case where you had a power system that was simple and fair, meaning guns weren't that shocking to the system. Now, after the introduction of Hockey, they still don't break the system, but guns are more relevant when anyone can coat their bullets or even arrows using Hockey. Notice how once we add more checks and balances, this moves One Piece closer to that one quadrant where guns are actually overpowered. It's not quite there yet, but it gets closer with more complexity.
It's
But I do have to
not though,
mention
bro.
that this
'Cause
quadrant
if you have higher hockey, bro, the bullet doesn't do nothing to you, bro. We're talking about power systems where somebody can pick up a gun and it literally shatters the power system, bro. And there's not a lot of shows that do that, bro. But the shows that do it right, bro.
system isn't perfect, and there's no clear cutoff for a power system being simple or complex. A great example of this that actually inspired this discussion is Gachi Akata, specifically the scene where Rio pulls out a gun and
Yes.
starts shooting raiders. Just before she does, we watch how Zonka loses to Jabber in a fight that sets you up to believe that the untalented hard worker was going to win. But then Rio shows up and shoots the winner of that fight. Mind you, there is plenty of detail in Gachi Akata's power system. We know how you gain abilities, the different types of abilities, and there's even some limits on the abilities. But the abilities do get pretty crazy, and unlike a series like JoJo or Hunter x Hunter, there really aren't that many checks and balances. At the same time, this power system is clearly more detailed than something like Dondadon's power system, in the fact
Facts.
that Rio gains such a clearly unfair advantage against two enemies by using a plain old gun does tend to imply that the power system is carefully balanced.
Yes.
This is an example of how the fairness and complexity spectrum is still useful as a frame of reference, but it's not perfect, and it doesn't define every power system. It also doesn't account for a third element that guns exploit in anime, and that is innocence. Because fairness is by definition a fair principle, any story that uses it tends to have a more innocent tone or worldview. Like our quadrant system, it's not a binary thing, but allowing anyone to achieve their goals or get stronger kind of depends on at least some optimism. And that's exactly why guns are shocking in any story that is even remotely fair. Gachi Akata is a great example of this because prior to that scene, we just thought Rio was unhinged. But when you see how
Real.
willing she is to break the rules and take out her enemies by any means, suddenly you see a much darker side to her that sets her apart from every other character. Another great example of this actually comes from Hunter x Hunter. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but there's a scene where some hunters are like, oh my god, we finally got away from the ants. And then an ant shoots them with a gun and unloads a whole magazine.
Oh, I remember
this,
this,
in
bro.
my opinion, the best example
This, bro, these are power systems that I wish more anime would give us, bro. Because, bro, fundamentally, bro, having a power system that can be negated by guns shows how realistic the anime or how close to reality the anime is, bro. That's how I look at it, bro. Because Hunter x Hunter, bro, you got niggas like Gon, bro. You got niggas like the chairman, bro, with his little like Buddha ability with the multiple hands, bro. That nigga looks insane. But to know that that nigga can get popped by a gun if he sneak attacked tells you a lot, bro. Tells you a lot about tells you about a lot about our world too, bro. You could be somebody who's in the gym 24/7, lifting weights, going crazy, going kreeski, getting buff as hell, looking like Hulk Hogan and shit. But when the gats come out, when the fives come, when the 9 millimeters come out, you're done, so you're done, bro. You're in the grave, nigga. Nobody can. That's literally. It shows literally how dangerous guns are. You even see that in Chainsaw Man, bro, with the gun devil. When they just pull out a and start firing at niggas, you can already tell that guns legit like negate any power system, bro. Because in these worlds, bro, people are normally used to just hand on hand combat, and it makes sense because in the countries that these shows take place in, it's not like the United States, bro. They normally either take like a British approach to stuff, a Japanese approach to stuff, but normally it's not a Westerner approach to stuff. So guns are not just something you can go out and go get in most countries. Guns are not just something you can just have on you in most countries. So that's what brings a shocking factor to this. Normally you're fighting somebody with a knife in the street, or you're fighting somebody just hand to hand, bro. So yeah.
Of more complex equals more funny because Hunter x Hunter is infamous for having more rules than any other power system, and in this scene, that all gets thrown out the window when someone decides to pull out a gun. It not only shocks the power system, but the scene is written in a way where you don't even see the character until after they shoot the gun, so the initial shock of the bullet is that much more surprising. But probably my favorite example of guns being used in anime is Eden Zero. This one stands out because it doesn't even take place during a fight. This takes place after Shiki loses to the villain Draken Joe. Mind you, prior to this point, Eden Zero was fairly lighthearted like Mashima's other stories, and included familiar themes like the power of friendship. But then Draken Joe says F you to friendship and power systems, and executes the main character of the story with a handgun. This is still one of the most shocking moments in anime because it shattered any innocence in the story and completely reshaped the viewer's assumptions about who was safe. And this is why guns not only should be overpowered, but they kind of need to be because they're a great way to shock anime. They expose flaws in seemingly perfect power systems. They're a great test to determine.
Nah, this is a video that I genuinely gotta say is good, chat. If y'all seen this, show some love to Shonen OG, cause he literally did his big one, bro. Good video, genuinely good video, genuinely beautiful video. Chat, I appreciate everybody for zapping in. As always, keep guiding your life, little niggas. Um, yeah, as we saw, bro. I don't even have to elaborate because I already said what I had to say, man. Love y'all, bro. Deuces. Grr.